If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we shall review the Victorian Age Vampire corebook as I present my thoughts and opinions on its presentation and mechanics to help you better decide whether this is the game for you. It was the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in the hope that St. Nicholas would soon be there. The family were horny and most very queer, playing their games they held so dear. Gather round forums and social medias to boot. I dare say some interactions were rather cute. Clustered together like lights and moths, strange social butterflies, these nerdy goths. Abruptly one night, 5 in my Discord, eager to play, Victorian Age Vampire had insisted they would pay. They approached yours truly, your Lord and Saviour, to run a game for them to bring his unique flavour. Like a butch with needs, I pounced at the book. Along with this game, a chance I merrily took. The quintet turned quiet as if I weren't there, which to this day I still don't think is fair. When out from my phone a tone beeped and turned me quite red, that caused sudden fright as I nearly shat the bed. A message from Outstar, their new world of darkness face, told me of an event and offered me a place to run a cool game for family and friends, and who was I to deny such cool trends? I presented the game so eager and keen, excited as one at that point had ever been. The game was Rip the Ripper, filled with intrigue and gore, a V5 one-shot you know I've mentioned before, filled with the family's finest, Ellie Collins and the pagan called Faye, all really nervous, hoping it would go okay. But not as scared as I, this virgin storyteller amongst STs, a masochist with stress right up to his titties. But I ran the game and the players had a blast, yet I can barely remember the sesh the game went so fast. Nearly 2 years old was that Victorian Age game, which no doubt helped me garner some fame. So is it worth your coin, either silver or gold, or should you leave this well alone, so dated and old? Would it cause you to scream with all your bloody might, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night? But before we do that, here are the rules for the Law by Night book reviews. I will explore snippets of the lore, mechanics and rules found within the tome. I will look as to how they are presented, and easily they are conveyed to new and old players alike. As this is a review written and presented by me, all thoughts and opinions are my own, so if you disagree with something I have said, that is totally fine. It does not mean that you are right and I am wrong, and vice versa. As with my previous book reviews, I will start at the very beginning, which is the physical book itself, which currently sits nicely upon my lap. It is a letter-sized hardback book made out of that slightly squishy cardboard material, meaning it will mark easily. That said, mine is currently free from such creases, despite the countless times I've read through the book, and even if it did mark in this manner, that would not bother me too much, but I know that sort of thing will annoy some people. My solution to this is to purchase the PDF copy from Drive-Thru RPG. Turning our attention to the front cover, I fell in love with the gothic gate design the moment I first laid my eyes on it, which probably surprised no one. The inclusion of the nodist skull and the thorns and roses that curved around it, calling back to the original Vampire the Masquerade corebook, is just beautiful, if not all that subtle. That said, the Victorians weren't exactly known for their subtlety, despite their best efforts. This gate is in front of a murky/foggy sepia tone background, which I've always felt mixed feelings for as long as I love the logo itself. Whilst I'm not fond of the colour, despite it being aesthetically correct, if we think of it as an old photograph sort of approach, it does somehow work. It's not distracting, it's unique, and it's set apart from the marble design of other legacy VTM books. The Iron Gate motif continues throughout the book, mainly in the form of the page and character sheet borders, which are subtle yet refined. The back cover follows a similar scheme. The Iron Gate motif, minus the gate itself, leaves a simpler version of the title at the top of the page, with a clear and easy blurb of the book's contents. The heading is Gothic in style, yes, but they are accessible too, which is something I appreciate. Obviously learned their lesson from Wraith the Great War. As we're talking about the design, let us talk about the artwork. I feel that White Wolf artists here really captured the Victorian era beautifully. It oozes the world of darkness from the pores, its sophistication, its danger, its lust, and every portrait or scene has some debased secret and story to find. Despite being mostly the same artist found in previous World of Darkness books, it doesn't feel like that. The art here is truly unique and wonderfully gothic. I particularly like the pieces done on pages 10, 181 and 201, as well as the unique sigils that take up the first page of a chapter. However, I am not fond of all the pieces. These make the large page spreads just before a chapter starts and the smaller Victorian Age Vampire Ankh, which share the same problem for me, which is that they have a weird dated CGI look to them, particularly with the Ankh. When you open the book and read the bittersweet tale that feels like a true romantic goth vampire story, we are immediately placed into the first chapter. The void that was the introductory chapter proper was missed, as it's really an introductory paragraph and a bit at the beginning, which I will go into shortly, in addition to a recommended reading and viewing list at the end of the chapter. There is no real detailing of what the book aims to cover and what you will find inside. That wouldn't be very Victorian now, would it? This was the age of romanticism, lyrical poise and sophistication and the gentlemen's clubs and so forth. It wouldn't feel right to just give the reader the information in such a familiar format. Instead, we are told in riveting detail this game is set in what is known here as the Gothic Victorian Age, spanning between 1880 and 1891, but the ST and players can obviously be a bit more flexible with this as they see fit. I find the ending here to be particularly interesting, as it all ended when Dracula broke the Masquerade, and if I need to tell you how he did this, you really shouldn't be playing Vampire. The chapter goes on to present the Victorian era in a new yet dimmer gaslight, as the night, as it always has done, is ruled by the Camarilla faction of vampires, the strange moral duality the neonates face, and how the elders struggle to keep up with the ever-developing industrial age. The Sabbat here are the myths and horror stories that make up the vampire tales at the time, embodying them as the elders pushed forward their spiritual crusade. The Camarilla emulates the kind, gentlemanly demeanour almost to the point of parody, whilst the Sabbat are virtuosos of horrific victimization and torture as the sex unification takes proper effect as they truly establish themselves in America. The roles of neonate, ancilla, elder, and Methuselah are broken down across each of the sects, leaving no uncertainty about the difference between them during the Goth and Victoria Age, in addition to each clan and how each one slots into the upper, middle, and lower class societies, which is pure genius, would have ultimately failed as a book if it didn't, in my totally biased opinion. There is even an interesting little box encouraging the storyteller not to be pedantic with dates and historical events if they so wish. It also gives you a small list of Victorian innovations, with dates and how and when kindred populated the rest of the world. This carries on with the focusing on the unlife of vampires, mostly from the Camarilla and Sabbat perspective, how they blend into society, acquiring domains and havens, the romantic spin on hunting, blood bonding, the embrace, and all the other political and occult themes so common across older Gothic vampire tales and Vampire the Masquerade, including the injection of curiosity of the supernatural in the Vampire Hunter. Of course, you may know all of this from your own research and from playing other versions of Vampire the Masquerade, so you may feel inclined to skip these portions, but as I've said previously, a new perspective is needed to appreciate this version of VTM, and it's such an entertaining read, and perhaps, dare I say, one of the more masterful chapters in any World of Darkness book I have read to date. If, however, I were to make a couple of minor complaints about the chapter, it is probably the lack of development of the Anarchs and the Independent clans, which both get some expansions in later chapters, be it sparsely. Anything regarding the Malkavians is also grossly offensive. The usual the Mad Clan gets the Mad Fiends, which is no surprise to anyone listening to this, I'm sure. To that end, that leads nicely into Chapter 2, which presents the 13 clans available in that oh so familiar older edition format. Almost. Rather than taking up 2 pages per clan, it is 3, almost 4 pages in some cases, really giving a broad overview of the stereotypical member of each of those clans, or, as the book puts it, a common ground or an understanding of what everyone knows, adhering to the tones of cultures and people of the time, whilst not being too offensive. Typical domains and interests in the world are highlighted, yet their clan disciplines and weaknesses are absent. Of course, we all know what they are and can refer to a previous book for any reminders, but one shouldn't have to do that. None of the Dark Ages book pertains to such tradition, and unless this is a weird printing error in my drive-through-RPG copy, this is a weirdly bad design choice. The one exception to this is regarding the Malkavians, as the Great Prank has not happened yet, so the Camarilla Malkavians have Dominate, Obfuscate, and Auspex, and only the Malkavian Anti-Tribu, the Sabbat variants, possess Dementation, Auspex, and Obfuscate. Each of the clans has their own logo, as before, but adorning the Victorian iron gate idea, like the front cover, which I'm not a fan of here. Most of them are messy and not very well thought out, which is a shame, because they could have each had been far more impressive than what they actually were. The third chapter is all about character creation, which I'm sure I don't need to go into too much detail about, given my extensive character creation guides. Whilst mostly identical to V20, which is why I'm not going to do a character creation for this unless a lot of people want it, there are some differences, mainly with replacing some of the abilities. Ride replacing Drive, for example, some alternate merits and flaws, and just the whole treatment of creating a character with that period with a different relationship with one's humanity, whether you follow the path of humanity or not, both are covered. Next is a big old geographical chapter, as we explore the literal world during the Victorian period, starting with good old London town, moving through the United Kingdom, then smaller but still extensive paragraphs on Europe, Russia, the various colonized nations like Egypt and India, and some portions in the United States of America. It is all delivered in character via an ancestor of Dr. Douglas Netchurch, the Malkavian, a Dr. Cornelius Netchurch, who is almost implied to be a wraith. This chapter is a very beefy one, and can be somewhat of a dry read, especially as the artwork is at its most sparse here, which perhaps is the main flaw with it. I am not going to go through much more of this chapter because it is a big boy, but anyone wanting to use this book for a source book to leap off how things may work in their modern chronicle can find plenty here. Chapter 5 is the storytelling chapter that really takes Vampire the Masquerade back to its roots, which I don't mean the goth punk setting, but goth. What is it? What are its elements? How it functions in a story? And the importance of place and locations in gothic tales, all peppered with storytelling ideas and themes to really sink your teeth into. It doubles on the supernatural more than any other VTM corebook, which makes sense, given the gothic roots and the obsession the middle-class Victorians had at this time. See my Mediums and Ghost Hunters in the World of Darkness podcast episode for more information on that. There is also information on how to tie all of this into your chronicles and how to take the existing lore and mechanics and alter them even further, with suggested rule changes and additional themes and how to run a good story, rather than just going through the motions of playing a game. More so than most storytelling chapters, this one is imperative to anyone who runs or even plays Vampire, just finding the tone of VTM. To truly appreciate something is to learn about its roots, and you won't find a finer place than here. The final chapter before an afterword and index is an antagonist chapter, which is filled with a variety of mostly balanced foes, both mortal and supernatural for the ST to get inspired by or to use right out when the creative juices are not flowing for one reason or another. You have your typical Inquisition hunters and werewolves in here, as well as some culturally appropriate ones like D-Parlor Mystic and the Agents of the Queen, which I used as inspiration for my one-shot, Silent Night, all be limited to only the Western world. There are also some particularly unique and strange additions like Nightmares, the Freemasons, some Evil Twin, and even Madness Incarnate gets an appearance. Every entry has riveting artwork to boot too, striking up fear, intrigue, and inspiration, as proven by the previous sentence and 2 one-shots I ran. I don't think there is any doubt in your mind about my views on this book. It is a beautifully crafted work of fiction that puts goth in Vampire the Masquerade. It is a brilliant resource for storytellers wanting to use this as a source book for other editions of Vampire the Masquerade, or just to play the game as it is presented in the book. It provides countless of inspiration for any fan of the TTRPG. Despite feeling a little salty about it still, I thank those 5 members of my Discord server who got me to buy this book. I thank Outstar for letting me run this game and take the setting of the Victorian Age Vampire more seriously than I did previously. Please, for the love that is holy, buy this book and do some Victorian Age shit. And for those of you who are new to the Law by Night brand and the reviews I occasionally do, I do not do out of 10 scores because they are subjectively pointless. One person's 10 out of 10 is another's 3 out of 5 stars, which is another's minus 42 out of 100, so I shall rate this book The Blood Curse out of 10, as that is just as helpful as a proper out of 10 score. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, and you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.